Hey everyone, Chris and Jason here with the Private Lenders Podcast. As always, sponsored by our lending company, hardmoneybankers.com, and our mastermind group for private and hard money lenders, hardmoneymastermind.com. Go check it out, get a free account anytime. All right, so today we are talking about default workouts and what your options are for the best end result. So if you've been doing loans for a while or plan to, you'll be very familiar with these situations, because if you do enough deals, you're going to catch defaults. We probably always have, I don't know, a handful of default situations that we're working on any given time based on 220, 230 loans outstanding. And so we've seen a lot of stuff, seen a lot of different scenarios. And one of the most important points to keep in mind when it comes to default situations is the old adage that pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered, right? That decision right there pops up a lot in our business in various ways, definitely when it comes to default. And what I mean by that is, in most default scenarios, if you did the loan in the right way, you're going to end up with a windfall at some point. It could be a big one, it could be a medium one, whatever. But pushing to collect every last dollar possible might end up hurting you way more than it's going to help you, because you might not end up getting there. You might end up in a situation you don't want to be. We're going to talk about a couple different scenarios today.
Yeah, I was going to maybe even back up and break down real briefly. We've done other videos and podcasts related to this. Some of how some of these payoffs can get higher and higher and some additional income streams. But like what you said, the breakdown, sometimes you just got to put your ego aside, and it's hard to do that, right? Because it's just as quick as you want your borrowers to get in and out of these things and perform. When a deal starts going sideways, it's best, even if there's a lot of equity in the property and you could potentially, make more by running default interest and stuff. Sometimes it's just best to get out, move on, take the capital and deploy it back into a good performing loan. And obviously none of us, you never go into a loan thinking that it's going to default or hoping that it's going to default. Don't do a loan if you think it's going to default. The goal of this business is to deploy capital in good performing loans, but inevitable happens and you got to be prepared. So I'll break down real quick, how some of these loan payoffs and some of these fees could potentially go up, right? Typically private lenders have some sort of default interest in their notes. So, that could up the interest rate. Let's say you have a 13% note and it's got a 24% default interest rate. Let's say the borrower stops performing. Technically, you could go after them for 24% interest. That's 2 points a month. That's a lot of money. There's late fees, there's extension fees, potentially, there's attorney fees that go into these things. I mean, it's not uncommon that if you do a loan for $100,000 and the borrower doesn't perform for, let's say, a year, it's not uncommon that $100,000 loan could have a balance of, $130,000 in a year between past interest, default interest, late fees, attorney fees. When you start working through attorney fees and foreclosures, judgments, collections, like, it gets expensive. So again, it's good to have the option to be able to collect and make the decision of what works best for you inside your business. But like Chris was saying, be smart about it and get out. And it's easier said than done. I think it's easier for us to say now, knowing, but at the beginning, it could be a little bit challenging because you also have your capital investors that you have to appease. You got to remember that. And early on, a capital investor might say, go full throttle, get them for whatever we can get. And technically, they have every right to do that and enforce the note. But sometimes on a business decision, that just might not be the best thing.
Oftentimes, I know a lot of people think, real estate investors, maybe newer lenders, they think well, if you default, they're just going to take the property. And now it's easy to say that sentence, but to actually do that and go through that legally and business-wise is not so easy or quick or inexpensive. So I think one of the main points to take home is that foreclosure, an auction sale, and possibly owning the property is usually the worst case scenario. That's your worst exit based on anything you could do. And there are different ways that a borrower could get out on their own. And you have to make business decisions about what makes the most sense. So if somebody just totally disappears on you, abandons the job, you have no choice, right? You got to go steamroll all the way through the foreclosure process. That's it. You got no options if they disappeared. But that's rare. Usually they don't disappear. They default for some other reason. They run out of money, or they're putting their funds into, or time and funds into another job. Sometimes they'll even move into the property. Like there are things that happen, and you have to think about it and like understand the options and work it out. So we're going to talk about a couple scenarios that we have dealt with recently and are dealing with now that might give you a little bit of guidance on these situations. So, okay, here's one that I was thinking of. It was a defaulted deal in Philadelphia that paid off about a year ago, or maybe last fall. And the guy went over the maturity date. He was behind on getting construction done, and he was way behind in payments. At first, we couldn't, I want to say that we did get way into the foreclosure process, but it was during pandemic times and things were behind and stalled, and it was taking a long time. And before we could get even near a sheriff's sale, is what they call in that market, he finished a job and went under contract himself, right? To sell the property, much more than our loan amount. We had a really high, like maybe that $300K loan turned into a 400 or over or something like that with all the stuff tacked on. And so I was speaking to the borrower and to his real estate agent, and we were negotiating the payoff, long story short. Like maybe it was, $400K and we were going to take something like $370. Still a fine exit for us, not get into a fight. Because he was threatening, he's like, I'm not going to take this contract unless you take X payoff, and then we're going to end up at a sheriff's sale. And if we get there, you're going to get less, which is true. Because if you get to a sheriff's sale, all kinds of other stuff gets tacked on. Like you're going to have more attorney's fees to get there. You're going to have actual commissions and stuff from the sheriffs, and that varies based on jurisdiction and stuff. A lengthy process of selling the property, auditing the sale, actually getting your money. Even if we were going to get more later, possibly, and that was not guaranteed by any means, it didn't make sense. We had a settlement and a payoff coming in less than a month, whereas it would have gotten dragged out for a long time. And I know they were, just selling their side and being like, we're going to walk away, and who knows if they would have or not, right? And I made a judgment call. I'm like, I'm going to take this discounted payoff, which is fine, instead of sticking it to this guy and going all the way through and maybe even hurting ourselves in the end. And we took like a little bit of a haircut as total fine exit, and we moved on. And even though that annoyed me, it annoyed me when someone went to default and then they BS with you and then they try to negotiate with you later. It was annoying. But like Jason said before, you have to set your ego aside and make a good business decision.
And that's hard to do. And that's hard to do because every single person that's probably listening to this has some sort of D personality type. And, you feel screwed, right? You feel screwed, but really you're not. You still got a good interest rate return. And again, when we talk about these, let me mention one thing related to this. Like, this is a very, very small portion of your portfolio, but it's got to be understood. It's got to be dealt with. If you feel like you're playing defense all the time inside your business and inside the deals you're working on, you're not doing good enough deals. It's that simple. Like this should be a small portion of your portfolio. But a small portion of your portfolio, it still takes a heck of a lot of time, right? There's still a lot of man hours that goes through this. So, if you're dealing with any more than a few of these at any given time, like you got to start doing better deals and learning from these mistakes. I remember early on, like 07, 08, when we started, there was a lending company that typically would do like the loan to own model. I was like, and we didn't fully get it then, and I certainly don't get it now. I'm like, really? You want to do this as an acquisition strategy? Like, that's not even fun. Like, it'd be miserable. You're just dealing with headaches and headaches and headaches of this. So, so like we were saying, leave your ego aside, but also this doesn't mean that like we're taking a loss on any of these deals. This means that we're taking a haircut on fees and interest and stuff like that. We did a deal recently where we recently got paid off on, and Chris and I were analyzing the numbers. And instead of getting a 24% interest rate of return cumulative, it was like a 17% interest rate return. We cut our late fees in half, things like that. So it's still a very, very good win for us, for our capital investors as well. And you know what? And, again, sometimes it's, like Chris said earlier, related to the borrowers, and some of them just disappear. And it's like, you don't really have any pity if they're just disappearing and you can't communicate with them anyways. But some of the times, putting someone in default and doing some sort of creative workout that's a win-win situation is good for everybody as well. There's a lot of clients that have been in default with us that we've potentially done other loans for because, we respect their situation, right? They were in a bind, right? So we figured out a good workout, and it worked out for them, it worked out for us. So, this isn't like, us versus them battleship, right? You got to figure out what makes sense. Now, obviously, you protect your investors first and you second, and then the borrowers after that, but it can still be a win-win situation.
Yeah, I was going to actually mention that recent default payoff that you spoke about a second ago. So what happened in that situation is we did 2 loans for this borrower, and 2 is like attached properties or next door, right? So we did, I think it was $93,000 loans with a construction holdback on either one. And the guy got into default, got behind on payments, didn't have money to finish the job. I don't think we had released all the funds because he had stalled, something like that. Plus, the 2 partners, the 2 borrowers that own this business entity, they split up, right? One was blaming the other for you messed this up, and then one declared bankruptcy a while back. And we didn't know this, but behind our loan was a private lender who did a blanket loan on 2 of them. And this guy did not do a smart loan. I've spoken with the guy over the past year, and he did a loan he shouldn't have done, but it ended up working out good for us. Do we want them to have other loans behind ours? According to the documents, no, but in real life and in workout situations, it can actually benefit you. And here's why. A couple different things can happen. When you have a private lender behind you and a loan goes into default, we've seen it happen that they would actually buy our note, right? Instead of going, because if a property is not finished, that's the worst time to go to an auction sale, a foreclosure auction. Property that's not finished, like your equity is not where it's supposed to be. I mean, hopefully you still have some construction funds if they didn't finish, if you do all of that process right. But still, like there's a huge difference in value between a property that's almost done and a property that's done and ready for market, right? So in this particular case, the private lender behind us knew that he was going to get wiped out if we got to an auction sale. And we were in that process. And he contacted me and we made a deal where he would come in and finish along with the borrower, kind of like as a team, finish the jobs. They're going to come in and finish the projects and sell it for full market value because he's trying to recoup some of that money from that dumb loan he did behind ours. That's a better result for us. And we negotiated a payoff amount. We negotiated it was something like that. Instead of getting our full 24%, it was like 16 or 17% interest it would work out to be. And we cut down some fees and this and that. Fine exit. Better than rolling the dice at an auction sale. So out of those 2 properties, one of them sold a week or 2 ago. And the other one's under contract to sell. We paused the foreclosure process. We gave them, here's a flat amount we're willing to accept, good through a certain date. And that private lender came in and basically saved some of his own money and the borrowers from going to foreclosure and got us a better result than we might have gotten by going to foreclosure auction sale. So that's a business decision as well. We didn't have to do that. We could have just powered through and been like, screw you guys, we're going to auction sale and whatever happens, happens. But those numbers don't work out great. I'm telling you, they don't work out great. Like when you end up getting through that thing and then the property taxes are on you and all the other stuff. So yeah, part of it's ego, part of it's understanding what could happen in various real estate situations. And mind you, some of this comes from experience. Like you don't really know, like, in theory how this would play out, but you don't really know those numbers till you're there. Right. And then it's just, good business decision making, intuition, all that too, all factors into making that right decision on the default.
Yeah, and keep in mind in these situations, in this situation, we haven't been getting payments in, right? Wouldn't you rather get out and get a good rate of return and redeploy it? It just makes so much more sense to have the money back and keep going and then less headaches. I'm going to sum this up. There's kind of 3 different avenues that you can take. We'll sum it up for that, and then we can kind of end. On one extreme, it's like, I'm just going to stick it to them, and I'm going to just be handed off to my attorney, just let my attorney handle everything. And this is real life of what we've seen people do, right? So you can just be like, cool, just hand it to the attorney, let them deal with everything, right? And just do it by the book, just do it by the note, and kind of do it that way. And again, on paper, it makes sense. But in reality, there's challenges. On the other side, I don't want to say you're getting tricked by the borrower, but the borrower just abuses you. Like, oh, don't worry, I'll get you a payment in. I'll get you a payment in.
Right.
I'll take care of you. Don't worry. Don't worry. If you go down that road, you're going to be in the same situation a year from now, except you're going to have no money from them. You're going to have pissed off capital investors. And we've done that. We've wanted to appease sides of this. And, we've been tricked by borrowers of like, don't worry. Because typically it's like, hey, I'm going to finish this project and I'll get to your project, or I'm selling a property, or I'm going to refinance it, or whatever the case is, right? We're typically, again, we're active lenders. We understand it. I don't want to say that like we can see into the future, but like we've been through 3,000 of these loans and a lot, a good handful of defaulted ones. So we kind of see what the outcomes are going to be. You got to recognize we're in a good real estate market right now. If they can't unload this thing now, you're potentially going to be in trouble. The other thing is like these properties, they only can absorb so much non-payments and default interest and stuff before they just don't make sense. So you don't want the borrower walking away. Obviously, you don't want to lose out on principal or profits and interest and things like that. I'm not saying take a hit on some of these things, but the point is be proactive, be creative, and most of the time, as long as you wrote a good loan, it'll work out just fine.
Absolutely. Yep. And just remember the old saying, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. Make your money, earn your profit like you're supposed to. Don't be greedy, and everything will work out much better.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you.